Kung pinipilit ka ng partner mo, it only means that he or she doesn't respect you and your choices. And then I would ask you, would you really want to be with someone, or would you really want to share not just your body, a part of you, with someone who doesn't respect your choices? Pagmamahal ba talaga yon? Or is it something else? I'm Rica Cruz, a licensed psychologist, a sex educator, and a sex and relationships therapist. For years, I've listened to women talk about their self-doubt, apprehensions, and insecurities in sex. And what I tell them is this: you're okay, you're normal, and your story is my story. I want us women to enjoy sex, to see sex as something good, and to own our womanhood in and out of the bedroom. Kaya dito sa Conservative Ako, kahit hindi naman kami conservative, we'll talk about everything you've always wanted to know about sex and female pleasure to help each other embrace and unleash our inner sexy goddesses. In this episode, we'll talk about first-time sex. We want to know about women's experiences with having sex for the first time. Does it really hurt? How do you know if you're ready? And we'll talk about how you can prepare for your first time. We'll throw in some research as well. With me today is Tanya and Lee to talk about their first-time experiences. And also with us is Athena, who will give us questions on what to expect for her first time. Hi, Tanya! Are you excited to talk about your first time?
Kinda nervous, but I'm okay.
Okay, how about you, Lee?
I'm excited if I can remember what it was like.
Tagal na ba? And how about you, Athena? Are you excited to learn?
Yeah, I'm very curious and have many questions.
Oh, yay! Okay, so having sex for the first time, or losing one's quote-unquote virginity, is a milestone event for a lot of people, especially in our society, given the messages that we have about sex, right? But according to researchers and scientists, a first-time sexual experience may create a general pattern of thought and behavior. And this then guides sexual experiences and understanding of information concerning sexuality. Ibig sabihin, yung first time mo, it may guide you to knowing what to expect on your subsequent sexual encounters. And it will also give you your fantasies and your desires. It will help you build your sexual arousal template that we say, and to know more about your sexuality and what you want. So, paano ba nila nalaman to? They interviewed more than 300 young men and women about how they lost their quote-unquote virginity, or how they did their first time. And they found out that those who were most emotionally and physically satisfied the first time found their sex lives to be the most fulfilling. Those naman who had higher levels of anxiety and negativity with the first time, they reported lower overall sexual functioning. Kung baga, naka-apekto talaga kung paano nila na-experience yung first time sex nila towards how they experience sex as they grew into their adulthood. What about you, Tanya and Lee? Did you have an emotionally and physically satisfying first time?
Emotionally, yes, but physically, no. Because I thought sex should be about pleasure, but I didn't feel pleasure that much on my first time. I felt more of pain.
How was that for you? Like, when you felt pain, how did that happen?
I guess I thought I was already aroused enough, but then the nerves kicked in, and then even if I was using lubricant and stuff, I was still not, quote, wet enough for it to go in. But then we still tried to get it in, and that made it painful.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Lee? Do you still remember your first time?
Emotionally, I was very ready, and I think physically also. But because nga the person I was with was my high school sweetheart, and it was a time na finally we were the same. I was of the age of consent na, so Because he was a bit
young were you
older.
then? How young
No,
were
I
you?
was 18, he was 20. It was a decision naman, though medyo innocent pa ako kasi I was like, okay, parang what we were doing pala was leading up to that. And then we decided to have sex a few days later after our heavy makeout session, and then he brought it up and I was like, oh nga no, maybe we can do it. Emotionally, I was ready. And I was also very pig-headed about it because the first time it really hurt. And I didn't have lubricant. Parang we didn't have that notion of let's use something aside from a condom to make it pleasurable. And I'm saying I was pig-headed because it was really painful and I was bleeding a lot. As in, parang nagregla ako. But then I was like, sige lang, keep going because it's supposed to feel good eventually.
And did it feel good eventually?
Siguro after we stopped and then we did it again the next day pero may blood pa rin. And then the sessions after, that's when it started to feel good. Pero parang it took a while for my body to adapt siguro. So I don't know if it was like the shape of his penis or like how our positions were, but matyaga lang talaga siya.
So, parang tsinaga mo for it to
Yeah.
become pleasurable, but it was painful
Yeah, it was painful.
at first. Alright, how about you, Tanya? Was it the same experience? Like, how did you know that you were ready? And what did you guys talk about? Was it like a spontaneous, parang sexy time, tas bilang game na?
It was
or...
definitely not spontaneous. Like, it was really something we planned. I think, like, from the start pa lang when I met him, we were already talking about it. Like, our second date pa lang, I asked him, like, oh, did you have previous sexual encounters already? And were you tested? Because if ever we have sex, I want to know if it will be safe sex. He also told me na there's no rush and he'll really wait for when I'm ready. But then one day I decided I was going to be ready because I really wanted to know what sex was about. I wanted to know what the big deal was. So I said I was ready, and I knew I was ready because I knew I loved him already. And then and then so we really planned it. Like, we bought condoms and we bought lube, and we really planned that day we were going to have sex.
And you did.
Yeah, and we did, but it was kind of awkward because we had sex in his house and his whole family was home.
Oh!
We had sex in his
So
room.
how was that?
And I was like, are you sure? Like, am I allowed in your room? Your parents won't mind. And he was like, yeah, no, it's okay. You can be in my room. And then I was like, okay, so we'll just lock the door. Then he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, how about your brothers? They don't usually come by and disturb. And then he's like, no, they really don't mind me. I was like, okay. And then we were already starting, and then bigla there's na, Kuya, do you want to play with us? And I was like, putang ina.
So nakahubad ka na nun?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then, what happened?
And then he went to the door first, and he was like, oh, we're busy, we're watching a movie, maybe later na lang. I think that's also why I thought I was ready, and then bigla nawala ulit. Because,
Bigla kang kinabahan. And then?
And then, so we started slowly naman, like momal first, and then oral, and then
Oral, you went down on him or he went down on you?
both.
Okay. 69?
No. And then he asked, look, oh, do you think you're ready na? And I was like, yes. So we put the condom on, and then we put lube also on him first, and then on me also. We tried it with him on top, but then it was really painful. And he was like, oh, I read na if I'm on top, it's deeper. So maybe you should be on top first.
He told you that?
Yeah.
So parang he suggested for you to be on top
Yeah.
first. Okay.
So I was like, okay. So I tried putting it in. I had a vague idea of where my hole was. I knew naman na it should go there. Maybe the pain was the hymen breaking or opening. So we tried to put it in, but then when it was halfway in palang, he was done. So I was like, shit.
Oh,
It didn't
so
go in
he
yet.
came
Yeah.
without it being like fully inserted.
Yeah. So I was like, so does this mean I'm still a virgin or not? Because I wasn't sure yet if it was fully broken already.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we just waited for him to get ready again, and then we tried it again. Then it went in na fully, and I was like, okay. It really hurt, and there was a little blood, but then I felt okay naman. For me, it was more of the emotional connection and the meaning behind it rather than the physical pleasure around it for the first time. So since I felt safe naman and secure in my first time, even if it was painful, I knew it should feel good after a while. So we just kept practicing until it really
Practice
did
talaga.
feel
no?
good. Yeah, like,
So now, how is it like for you?
well, it's really good now. Because when I wasn't feeling good yet, I was like, maybe there's something up. Not naman something wrong, but baka we're not,
Doing it the right
like,
way.
baka we're not as informed on what to do. So, like, I would send him research articles on, like, how to make a woman come, like, using your fingers or, like, using oral, and then the best positions for
First time.
orgasms. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's really good now.
Congratulations. How about you, Lee? How is your sex life now?
My high school sweetheart and I didn't end up together. I've actually been in a relationship with my current boyfriend for 5 years. The thing is, long distance kasi kami. So we don't actually engage in sex a lot because of the distance nga. But because I learned a lot from my first relationship and my first time, and may emotional connection kami ng the person I had sex with for the first time. Parang eventually I started looking for that emotional connection also with the people who I do it with. And I can also say that because I've also done it with people who I have not had any emotional connection with. Honestly, masaya din yung doing it with people that you have no connection with. Kasi alam mong your pleasure and your experience is contained to that one night. And I was super lucky na the people I've done it with na kahit na we didn't have a relationship, because I felt like I was assertive and I had ownership of like my body, I knew naman what I liked, I could demand na if this is a one night stand, gusto ko ganito.
Masaya.
Oo.
Make it worth my while.
And yun nga, parang baka nga that came from my first time being like, kahit na masakit, gusto ko masarapan
Game lang.
eventually.
Oo. Because I
So,
remember, you said na you let him just go through the motion kahit na nasasaktan ka na.
Oo. Kasi he was like, are you sure? Maraming blood. So natatakot siya na parang, are you okay? And I was like, let's go, let's do this. So, parang it stemmed then from that.
So Rika, sabi nga ni Tanya na it was painful when she first tried it. Were there any instances ba that you've heard of na hindi naman masakit on their first time?
It is common that during your first time, it's painful, and yes, some women may bleed. However, we want to stay away from that notion na it should be like that. There are ways that it can be better. It's not always the case, and it shouldn't be like that. So, may mga bagay na pwede kang gawin, especially if you're preparing for the first time, that would make your experience less painful and more pleasurable.
Tapos, Rika, paano yung sa hymen naman? Kasi I've read din before na merong mga encounters na kala nila virgin kasi may hymen pa. Pero there were others naman na virgin pa rin pero their hymen was broken na. Is that an actual thing ba?
No, it's not. The hymen is never a measure of your virginity. There is no such thing as the virginity test na nagsasabing kapag nakipag-sex ka, masisira yung hymen mo. Kasi your hymen, that's the thin sheet covering the vaginal opening, it can break through many reasons. It can break through exercising, running, horseback riding, doing the bike, or walking. Doesn't necessarily break just because you've had sex for the first time. So, yung mga nagsasabi na pag intact yung hymen mo, ibig sabihin virgin ka pa, or kapag sira na yung hymen mo, ibig sabihin hindi ka na virgin. Those are not true. There's no such thing as the hymen test. But the hymen is there. And there are different kinds of hymen. You can Google it. Merong butas-butas na from the start. Merong fully covered yung vagina. Merong mga may maliit lang na butas. Merong half covered. Iba-iba yung itsura niya.
Can you actually see it?
You may see it if you put a mirror in between your legs and then you examine your genital region. You may be able to see how your hymen looks. But like what I said, it can break naman in normal physical activity. Any more questions, Athena?
Actually, yeah. Kasi when Tanya and Lee were talking about how they were emotionally and physically ready na, paano ka nakakarating dun? Did you have to do something physically?
Ways to prepare for the
Oo.
first time. Parang
Yeah,
ganyan.
something
Physically.
like that.
Not just emotionally.
Not just emotionally,
rin.
pero physically na rin.
I think the people who can answer that are Tanya and Lee because they still remember how it was. For me, I just knew during that time that I wanted to do it, so I did. But it was so long ago, I can't really remember what happened. But how about you, Lee? How did you know that you were emotionally ready?
Galing kasi akong high school sa States. So, a lot of people were already doing it in that high school. And parang may stigma din doon na pag pumasok ang college ng virgin, parang may something sa'yo. Which is the opposite here because actually, when I was a first-year college student, which is when I lost my virginity, there was practically no one who was having sex during that time. But I think it was just because emotionally, I trusted naman the person. I knew him for a very long time kasi nga we were friends since early high school. We were in constant contact. So, the idea of trusting the person you're going to be doing it for the first time, na hindi ka lang iiwan sa area, I think that's also very important.
How about you, Tanya? What did you do to be emotionally ready?
You really have to trust the person or know the person well. With my boyfriend, we only started dating recently, but I knew him for 2 years already. And when we started dating, we tried to talk about it at the start pa lang. Yun nga, I asked him about his sexual history and stuff like that. And then just hearing na he would wait till I was ready and he wasn't going to rush me or pressure me made me feel secure in that relationship. Even before we had sex, I knew I loved him na. We said, I love you early on. And then we really defined the relationship clearly from the start. So I knew whatever happens, if we start, he's already my boyfriend. It's not just a random fling or anything. So I guess that's why I felt very emotionally secure and I felt ready to do it.
That's true. The emotional attachment that you have towards the person that you're gonna have your first time with is very important. Because according to research, most of the women, they have the tendency to become emotionally attached to their partners after the first time. So, mas importante na you trust the person you're with, you know that you're safe with this person, even though wala naman talaga sa utak mo that you're gonna marry this person. It's more on the moment that you know you are safe with this person that you're doing it with. Kahit pa kasi casual sex, you have that tendency to be attached with this person. And I also like what you said about being able to talk about it before you did it. Whenever I go around and give talks in universities, they ask me that question too, how would you know if you're ready to have sex for the first time? And I tell them, if you can talk to your partner about sex. When I say sex, it covers everything. Their sexual history, how they feel about using protection, how they would feel after having sex. If you can discuss that, what they want to be done to their bodies, to your body, if you can discuss that, then you're okay. Because it means that you have that certain level of trust and honesty and emotional attachment in the relationship. And I believe that that would help you not regret that afterwards.
Doc Rica, bakit mas na-attach yung babae after their first time sex kaysa sa lalaki?
When they did research on it, they found out that women secrete more oxytocin after sex. When you orgasm and after having sex, you secrete this kind of neurotransmitter, oxytocin. That is actually what we call the cuddle hormone or the love hormone. And it happens in response to nipple sucking or the cervical and uterine stretching. And even after a woman delivers a baby, the oxytocin is the one responsible for creating an emotional attachment from the mother to the child and from the woman to whoever she's having sex with. Sa mga lalaki, ang prominent ay dopamine, which is more on pleasure talaga as opposed to oxytocin. Kaya may ganong disconnect. But it doesn't mean that they don't feel that too.
So, paano naman kapag pushy yung lalaki, for example? How can a girl deal with that kung kunyari, they don't really want to have sex yet, pero they're scared na if they say no to the guy, baka mag-break sila or something.
Unfortunately, a lot of the students I've interviewed say that nakikipag-sex sila kahit na napipilitan sila just because they don't want to lose the guy or to break up with the guy. But when you come to think of it, this becomes an issue of consent and respect eh. 'Di ba? Kung pinipilit ka ng partner mo, it only means that he or she doesn't respect you and your choices. And then I would ask you, would you really want to be with someone, or would you really want to share not just your body, a part of you, with someone who doesn't respect your choices? Pagmamahal ba talaga yon? Or is it something else?
Can I add to that? Because I feel like it's true na if a guy can't wait for you, why would you really want to be with that guy? If he's pushing you to do that, what more can he push you to do? So I think it's really better na if he really doesn't want to wait, edi just
Drop him like
drop
a hot
him.
potato.
Yeah, just find someone else who's willing to wait and willing to respect you.
Pero paano, agree naman talaga. Paano
Oo.
kasi kapag, there's some girls kasi na they're very hesitant kasi attached na sila dun sa guy eh. Do you think ba na kaya nilang i-postpone by convincing the guy lang, or do you think na they should just break off lang talaga?
Like what Lee said, there's always negotiation naman in a relationship. Now, if they can negotiate and say that, okay, give me time, wait for me, and then the guy says yes, and well and good. Pero pag pinipilit sila, yun nga, it becomes a matter of consent and respect. Walang pilitan, especially when it comes to sex, diba?
True, true.
Actually, with my first time, di ba, I was in a long-term relationship naman din. Pero, medyo pushy kasi si guy kasi nga older na siya, tas matagal siyang naghintay. Ako naman, eventually, it became pleasurable. Pero because there was that pushiness that was framing our sex life, parang there were also times na hindi ako game, tas magsa-sex kami. Tas sige na, for the relationship, okay lang. I guess I don't mind it. And the negotiations, actually, were learnings from that previous relationship. I only learned all of that stuff after I went through some of the not so good stuff also. Like what you said, Doc Rica, na the first time also frames how you have your consequent, diba? It can help frame it. So, I had to also break free from that frame na, kasi marami nang gumawa nito, kasi matagal siyang naghintay, so I have to do it. I had to learn the negotiation, and I had to learn to speak up then for myself to figure out what's pleasurable.
Yeah, and that's what's important talaga, to be able to negotiate from yourself and for yourself, not because you want your partner to feel this way, especially if it's first time sex. Kung gusto mo sumuko, go ahead, isuko mo yan, girl. 'Di ba? Pero kung ayaw mo, wag. It's all about you. It's your choice. And that was this episode of Conservative Ako. In the next episode, we'll talk about tips for a pleasurable first time. We'll also touch on how to protect yourself against sexually transmitted infections. At paano nga ba maglagay ng condom? To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to Conservative Ako on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platforms. And let's continue the conversation about female sexuality and pleasure online. Follow me at _Rica Cruz on Twitter and Instagram. And on Facebook, it's Rica Cruz and at The Sexy Mind for articles and bits and pieces about sex. This episode was produced by Trisha Aquino and edited by Nina Toralba of PumaPodcast. Conservative Ako is a production of PumaPodcast. We hope you learned something new today about first-time sex and how you can embrace your inner sexy goddesses and practice your sexual agency. Sending love and lust your way, and thank you for keeping an open, sexy mind. This is Rica Cruz. Goodbye.